G'day and welcome to the Grow a Small Business Podcast. I'm your host, Troy Truen. Each week, we speak with an owner who has grown a business with 5 to 30 team members to something bigger. Diving into their numbers and unearthing the pain they've experienced, we explore what they did to overcome each barrier and what they would do differently from day one. Let's get into it.
So welcome everybody. Today I'm interviewing David Reid, who's one of the owners of Business 360 based in Brisbane, Australia. I used to call that sunny Brisbane, and I think it's more the wet end of town, isn't it, David?
Well, that's right. It has been, hasn't it?
Yeah.
But anyway, we'll return to our former glory, I'm sure.
I'm sure. But today we're going to be discussing the transformation of your workplace for today and beyond, which I think is such an important topic, particularly around, there's talk of the great resignation and employees having more choices these days, or feeling they have more choice. So it's very much about retention, having those robust workplaces that you're going to provide some interesting thoughts and suggestions. So thanks for your time today, and let's get underway. So just to start with, can you tell the audience how we know each other?
Oh, we first met, I think about 4 or 5 years ago now, at a Succession Plus planning or seminar in Sydney. With Craig and the team down there. So is that a long time or a short time? I don't know, in the scheme of things.
Yes, well, certainly flown anyway. But and for our audience, Succession Plus are an organisation that help businesses with succession, obviously by their name. So tell our audience a bit about you and your experience on this topic.
Yes, it's been something interesting that we've watched, Michael, over the last couple of years. And I suppose COVID has spurred that on. And we've spoken about pivoting and all sorts of things with COVID, those buzzwords. And what's happened is how businesses go to market has changed. And because of that, it's actually changed the fabric of the business. And fabric of the business, we mean, is your workplace practices. So if you think about COVID, it's changed our workplace practices significantly. And the funny thing with it is the human element, the desks and the chairs and the microwave ovens, that's all remained the same. But the human element has changed a lot. So much so that we just watch ebbs and flows, a bit like interest rates, where it goes this way and that way. And what we've found is there's been lots of buzzwords around mental health. And we'll speak about a few of those today, about mental health, about social connection, about domestic violence, about flexible work requests, about safety at home. So all these things have come to the fore and changed. That fabric's changed. So what we once knew as work-life balance has now become life-work balance in the eyes of many, because now they're working from home and they don't have that social interaction with their colleagues at work. So we don't have social interaction. We don't have collaboration on projects to move the business forward. And people have become isolated, which has triggered, I think, initially performance gains, but I think performance declines, to be honest, because most people can't work under their own steam. I'd say, 2/3 of the audience, not audience, but 2/3 of the population of the workforce can't do that. And so what's happening is we've got a resistance to coming back to the workforce. We've got a resistance to collaboration, we've got a resistance to this, but it spurs on mental health. And other legislation around domestic violence, which is it's a poor thing in the society, but now it's become part of fair work provisions and part of work and safety provisions, and soon it'll become as a paid leave entitlement. So we've got all these knock-on effects as we find our balance within. There's a mathematical equation. The only thing I learned at school, Michael, remember anyway, is to every action there's an opposite and equal reaction. So we're seeing some of these things spin far too way to one direction. And shortly we'll talk about some of the strategies that we'll use to arrest this and bring the balance back to normal again. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. And so you mentioned about, I guess, what's been happening of recent years. So maybe just go back a step with your background and experience before we start to talk about some specific aspects of this topic.
Yeah, me personally, I'm one of the directors of Business 360. We're a workplace relations business. We specialise in implementation. So let's just meet the logistic requirement. Yes, we've got regulations around certain obligations or as a PCBU. And from there, we look at, well, how we brand them or implement them with the business's own values and ethics and slant on some of these things. And that will lead into what we're speaking about, because it's what we tolerate as businesses that sets the culture, funnily enough. And it's the guidelines of simple workplace practices in documentation and so on and so forth. So we do specialise in HR. We do specialise in workplace health and safety. We do specialise in implementation review and management training around how to manage some of these staffing matters. So those few areas, Michael, is what we do. My background's HR and management and all sorts of things over the years, training and so forth. So it's good to bring those to the fore, and it's obviously something we're quite interested in.
Yeah, fantastic. And I know we've worked with a few mutual clients, and I know they get a lot of benefit out what you bring to the table. So let's launch into a few specifics around this topic. So I guess is the question of, where have all the good staff gone, and how do I know when I have one in the first instance?
So interestingly, we'll talk about skill and will a bit later, I think, but it's a bit like, how do I know we've got one? And traditionally, if you're looking for a person and you put a job ad out, though there's not many great people around, and who knows where they are, it's a bit odd, because if 50% of the Australian workforce leaves their employment this year, they need to go to 50% of the jobs. So it should actually equate, but it's not. So the focus is on, that old children's game we use, Rob Robin's Nest, where they run around grabbing eggs from each other's little nest. That's what it's been. Coaching, that's what it's like. And with that in mind, it's been like, well, how do I know I've got a good egg? And traditionally, we've considered that in realms of experience, history, qualifications, all this skilly type stuff. But the problem is, skills on their own, I could be the best, whatever it is in the world, but if I don't have good personal and work ethics, it's just not going to be a happy relationship. So what we're finding is the ideal candidate or capability is skill and will. And we'll talk a little bit about today how do we start to move the pendulum from just assessing skill set, because in most positions, unless you're a brain surgeon or you need a certificate for finance advice or certain industries, a lot of skills are learned. What we're really looking for is people we can trust. And people we can trust in our business is really what's been lacking.
Which I think, core values are obviously a key piece to that conversation. And I guess we're now in an age of workplace flexibility. So, what are the challenges faced attracting and keeping good staff?
So some of those challenges is because they're skinny on the ground, they're meaning good talent. We need to be clear about what we stand for and what we're trying to achieve as a business. So if you think about any business owner listening to this podcast, your original intention for starting that business was to achieve certain goals. I'm interested in a thing, I'd like to move ahead in a career in this. I've got some work aspirations, I've got some financial aspirations, I've got some personal interests. Some people might even want to buy an expensive bicycle, Michael, because they might be into cycling or something crazy like that. But there's certain aspirations behind why you started this venture. And the good thing to understand is the people assessing your business beyond the money have the same sorts of aspirations. So how do we align and attract, and we talk about values or core values, but if you say values differently, what do you value? Oh, I value this. I value family. I value social. And we need to understand and start to breed some of that into that recruitment strategy where when we're speaking to people, to elicit what their goals are and what they're looking to achieve. And because if you're not providing that beyond the money, it just becomes a system of exchange. And one of the messages of today is a lot of this stuff that we do traditionally through the recruitment process is about exchange. I'll give you this and you give me that in return, master-servant relationship. But we've got to move exchange to engagement. And you think about that's how we do the keeping. So if I'm assessing, even if I work for you, Michael, okay, here's the position. Yes, I can do that. And the next thing they look at is the money. All righty. But then they look at, well, beyond that, what is here for me? And we have to start answering to some of that. So for me, it's eliciting, identifying, firstly, what our motivators are and what we value, and looking for those similar type things for fit with potential candidates, which we said is trust before.
Yeah, and you mentioned a few minutes ago that there's a sort of change of focus from work-life balance to life-work balance.
There is.
So what are the challenges that business and employees now face sort of getting that right?
Well, that's right. So the facing of getting that right is you have to understand what people are looking for. And it's quite a funny thing. When we do a lot of workplace visitation, the realisation on the business owner's face that when we say to them, when your staff come here, who do they work for? And the traditional answer is me. No, not you. The company. They don't work for the company either. And when they realise, they're actually here working for themselves. So if you have 30 or 40 or 50 staff, you're basically hiring 30 or 50 individual contracting businesses that are there for their own purposes. And as soon as we realise that, it's like, okay. And that's the truth, by the way. We just said so many times. So how do we connect or align purpose, which is some of the things we spoke about around that? But it's clear that once the money's sorted, and you see lots of surveys around retention and recognition and reward, and for us, we look at, okay, what the candidate's assessing is, on one hand, I've got the role and the responsibility, the give and take over on this end. On the other hand, I've got recognition rewards. So in some businesses, they're looking at, okay, and to be honest, it's more than free beer on Friday. So culture's more than free beer on Fridays, even though it's fantastic. But so what is it they're looking for? So flexibility rates highly, mental health programs or health programs, career advancement, training. So all of these things sort of stack up on this pendulum of recognition reward versus my role and responsibility. And that has to be based or built on the business's vision, mission, purpose. We have to be clear about that. And then when you talk about engagement, how we communicate is communication. So how do I communicate this simply to my team? But I have to understand their motivators. So to us, when we look at all the surveys, they're looking for, number one, do I feel valued? Reward and recognition, and what's some of those things, and we can sort of discuss that further. They're looking, secondly, what's the big picture here? What's the business transparency? You're trying to understand my goals, but I need to understand what the business's goals are so I can align to them. Because people who achieve a purpose or a task, you've got them. People need a sense of purpose, but we need to know what that is. So having transparency around the business goals, having transparency of how what I does, whether it's a menial task, fits into achieving that goal, which is that reward and recognition programs. And thirdly is, if I join your business, what's my personal career path to achieve my aspirations? Remember, we all have these 5 or 6 things sitting back here. And funnily enough, they're all very similar to the same thing. And so if I'm achieving these career aspirations, so you've got to either give me a career or not every role. There's some rudimental roles, obviously, where it is what it is. So if it's not a career aspiration, at least how do I give you some personal aspirations around a learning pathway? And a learning pathway of engagement. In the old days, you'd sort of throw someone in learning, but it was a disconnect between learning and achieving the person's personal outcomes and connecting the person back to the organisation. Most businesses did it because they got government incentives to train their staff. All got back to money. So it becomes transactional. So as soon as it's all about money, it's transactional. So we need to change the exchange.
Be the change you want to see in your business. Become more productive and less stressed with our free Transform Your Performance online course. Once you see the benefits, put your entire team through the course at no cost. We start out by telling you the secret to guaranteed success, then over 100 lessons help you be more focused, present, productive, and feel more in control about work. growasmallbusiness.com.
Yeah, it's a good point. I love that concept of understanding that employees really work for themselves fundamentally, but I guess bringing it back to purpose and values to give that connection. I think, working with many small, medium-sized businesses, that definitely is underplayed and not appreciated. So if you look at, you talk about attitude and care factor, I guess, what being the most important attributes in building an effective workplace. So just sort of elaborate a little bit more on that.
Yeah, so when we look at skill and will, so how do we assess will? Because isn't that mamby-pamby, will, attitude? But you can actually assess attitude very easily, and we do recommend people conduct check-ins with their staff. So you have performance annual reviews. We're not talking about that. We're talking about regular check-ins. Yes, there's surveying tools out there, but one-on-one is great. So depending on who it is, whether it's fortnightly or at least quarterly, where we check in and we just have an open conversation around where they want to go, stop doing this, start doing that, some of those things. But we have to start a measure. Okay, once we check in with you, for example, I might have a job on the front desk and I can assess you. Yes, you pick up the phone every time. You're always at work. So technically on skill level, 100%. I'll give you 9 out of 10. Okay. But on a will level, I do actually have a lot of complaints about attitude because you're walking dusty. And so there's the service aspect or the quality of the aspect. And what we're assessing in attitude or those cultural fit, capabilities, skill and will. So you can sometimes assess the same function for the skill and will. So that's easy enough to do. Or you might select, okay, well, how do their values line up? Or how do they go above and beyond? How do they demonstrate personal work ethics in their attitude? It could be another thing. They could be nominating team members and getting a score based on going beyond to help others. Or do they lead the narrative around supporting other people in the business? So all these care factor things. So we'd recommend that on one, yes, you already know what the skills are for the job, and don't have 50 things, by the way, 4 or 5, we'll measure them out of 10. We'll have 4 or 5 will things. So I've said a few different things there. So hopefully that gives you some thought around, we'll assess the quantitative and the qualitative aspect of the same role. But we also might have care factor type things or support of business or support of the plan. So that's a measure over here. We have 4 or 5 things. So we're measuring skill and will. So you're starting to get clear on, as a business, we value quality people. Because the thing with skill is I can have technical great skills. Yeah, I could be a fantastic footy player, right? But I can be a crap team member. So you can trust me with skills. And I've heard it said multiple times, I've even said it many times myself now, skill is I'll trust you with my life. You're a surgeon, you're a what we really want to know, especially with flexible work and this give and take arrangement with workplace practices now, and now you're at home, I need to be able to trust you. Trust is I trust you with my life. Oh, and that's actually more important. So skills get you the job, will keeps me the job. And so many times people come to us with to say, look, this guy's technically great. He's the best. He was, the best work, what we can get, but he's rubbish. He just doesn't fit. I can't trust him. We've got these complaints. He makes errors. So you've got all this skill and will problems starting to appear. So how do we start to manage and measure that in recruitment, but within our team? And to be honest, this sense of purpose, forget motivation, people need a sense of purpose. You have to be clear on what that purpose is. So if they know what you value, and if I understand in that process my staff member what they value, we can start to build on that. And things come up naturally around skills and career, and maybe you can fit here. you just got to engage and align, so on and so forth. But that's, to me, capabilities. That capability is not a skill set, to be honest. It's also a will set.
Yeah, that's good points. And I mean, listening to you, it seems bloody obvious, to be frank, these things. But
Michael, you know what people do to fix this problem?
What's that?
We go into workplaces and it's not quite working out, or they're causing me trouble, or what have you. You know what they do? I'll give them more money.
Yeah.
That will make them happy. That will buy them loyalty.
Yeah.
But the problem is, if you actually, remember I said, if you've actually moved to exchange, it's transactional. It's not engagement. And you're only delaying the problem or creating a bigger problem, because now I'm rewarding for poor performance. As I said, you're going to say, oh, that seems obvious too. But you know how often people use that as their strategy to fix this problem? All the time, which is very sad.
It is. So I guess in summary, I mean, it's obviously not just about salary, and you talked about the things that employees are looking for, which is sort of value and recognition, part of being something bigger in their role, and then the career plan and or learning pathway are sort of the critical takeaways. So in wrapping up, what is at least one thing you recommend a small business owner does on Monday, based on your knowledge and expertise in this area?
Yeah. So based on what we said around engagement and retention of good staff, is number one, be clear on what your goals are as a business and what you value or your values. Some businesses have them, some don't. I go into heaps of businesses where I say, can you tell me what's in your handbook? And they're like, oh, yeah, I can't. So they're obviously. So get clear on that, and then start to consider how I'm going to start communicating with my staff around what they value, and just bring these two things together. So we want to start engagement retention strategy where we assess some of these things. So get clear on that, and then consider what the measures will be with your staff to have this open conversation around skill set and will set. So what's the 3 or 4 things here? What's the 3 or 4 things there? And that's, to me, the starting point. We just got to get clear on what it is.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thanks again for your time this afternoon, David. I'm sure audience get a lot out of this podcast and your tips and thoughts. And no doubt I'll see you soon.
Yeah, thank you, everybody. I'm glad to help. And obviously, as Michael said, if we can be of assistance, we obviously do this. So if you want to help doing, love to assist or answer any questions.
Thanks, mate.
Thank you.
And for our audience, we would greatly appreciate a review in iTunes or whatever platform you listen to us on. More reviews means we bubble up higher in iTunes, etc. So more business owners looking for podcast help with their growth will find us.